Because of the dangers posed by improper handling of these materials, there are a number of regulations and standards that govern the materials. Regulations are issued by and enforced by government agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency. Standards, on the other hand, are best practice recommendations issued by non-government organizations such as the National Fire Protection Association.
If you go back and you look at the Industrial Revolution in the United States, when we had a lot of technology going on, there was a lot of chemicals being used, and there was a lot of chemicals being developed. They were just burying those chemicals, just throwing them out, putting them in the waterways, which became hazardous waste. I'm Les Cartier, and my title is Hazardous Materials Coordinator for the state of New Hampshire, and I'm with the New Hampshire State Fire Marshal's Office. I've been with the Fire Marshal's Office now 14 years. In hazmat, it's close to 41 years. They were just burying those chemicals. Years later, we started finding these issues that were coming up from hazardous waste sites. So EPA started getting involved in there, requiring training for people that are using hazardous waste. And also OSHA started to get in there because they were looking at it and they said, if EPA is requiring people to be trained to deal with hazardous waste, why aren't we training the people up front as a virgin waste hazardous material? Because it's just as dangerous up front. So they started to come out with some programs like OSHA 1910-120, which is basically our HAZWOPER program. It's a Hazardous Waste Operations and Emergency Response. And what that does is it requires both the industry to be trained how to deal with hazardous materials in their facility, and the emergency responders outside with how to be trained with regards to responding to those materials that are inside that facility.
Tonight, a federal investigation into a deadly chemical leak is underway. The spill happened early Saturday at this DuPont plant in La Porte, Texas. 4 workers were killed, including 2 brothers. Their father writing on Facebook, "My sons were awesome, hard-working men, and they lost their lives trying to help others. They will be missed, but never forgotten." A 5th exposed worker was rushed to the hospital for observation. The chemical released is called methyl mercaptan, commonly used to protect crops. It can be deadly in high concentrations and has a strong rotten egg smell. The foul odor spread across the Houston metropolitan area, up to 40 miles away.
We thought something had died in the house, and so we started burning candles at that point, and it didn't go away.
The company insists there was no danger.
There was never a shelter-in-place issued because there was never a hazard to our neighbors. There was a strong odor, and we deeply apologize for that nuisance.
After an incident, approximately 1984 in Bhopal, India, with a chemical that was a very toxic poison, it had killed and injured a large number of people that were there. They looked in the United States to see if that could happen in the United States. They found that yes, it could. So they needed a program of how they could notify the citizens of what's in their community, also the first responders of what's in their community so they'd be able to deal with it. So they came out with IPCRA. Under IPCRA, they have the Tier 2 program. The Tier 2 program requires industry that has over 10,000 pounds of chemicals a year or 500 pounds or less of an acutely hazardous substance to report that to the state so that the local emergency responders would know that and they could use Cameo to be able to deal with that incident. The IPCA program actually for our first responders and for the communities makes it a lot safer because the first responders know what's in there, they pre-plan what's in there, and they can deal with it should an incident occur. In New Hampshire, we have 2 emergency planning committees. One is a local emergency planning committee, and one is a regional emergency planning committee. From the local emergency planning committee, it's part of that IPCA program where it says that the communities need, under the right to know, to find out this information. Once they get this information, it allows people from the local communities to be able to put a plan together with how they would deal with a hazardous materials incident in their community. Some industries are required by law that they have to be on the local emergency planning committee. Basically, the regional committee is made up of the regional hazmat teams in some areas, where they would get all the Tier 2, all the information, and pre-plan any of the hazardous materials industries in their coverage area. All of that information from the LEPCs and the REPCs comes to the State Emergency Response Commission. The State Emergency Response Commission in New Hampshire, also known as ASEPS, the Advisory Committee on Security and Preparedness, is we look at it from a state level. How can we plan to be able to support these locals with regards to a hazmat incident that may occur in their jurisdictions? With regards to NFPA, those are kind of recommendations that we should be doing, that voluntary. They're coming off from those standards and saying, here's how we should interpret them. Here's how we should do them in the fire service. The fire service uses those as guidelines for a lot of the things that we want to do out there. Okay, some of the important standards relating to hazmat that are out there are NFPA 472, which is for our firefighter first responders. 473 is for our EMS responders. It basically teaches them about dealing with hazardous materials out there. Different levels of training depending on what they want to do for exposure and how close they want to get to it. What we're trying to do is educate our personnel, our first responders that are out there, to be safer and to improve their safety by using NFPA 472 or 473. The other NFPA code that we use out there is NFPA 704. And it's been used on a lot of buildings and tanks and other places that have hazardous materials. It has their 5-digit numbers on it, so you could look at the color code or the number and be able to identify right away what your potential risk is dealing with this material that's contained in this building or